back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host and disembodied hands Quindy, disembodied beard John, and absentee Kiki, who is distracted by watching birds and a squirrel. You know, she's got priorities. How are y'all? And happy Alpaca Day. If I just call it Alpaca Day, I never forget. Yes, it's Angry Link Day. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, we've got craptastic air quality here because there's apparently wildfires up in Oregon and the northern bit of California. And yesterday the wind shifted and blew all the smoke down here. It actually got hazy. It smelled like the whole neighborhood was grilling at once, and there was just this haze in the air. It was terrible. David checked the air quality this morning, and it's bad. It's like unhealthy still, even though it looks okay. But yeah. Yeah, it's ucky. So if I cough a lot, that's why. But not much to do. I don't want to totally close the windows or anything, so. And that'll just trap the bad atmosphere in here with us. No spare rain out here in our... ask Kerniko. Kerniko always has extra rain. That's what I've learned. The number one tip I've learned from my own stream is that Kerniko always has extra rain. And also that Small Scottish Cat is my biggest fan. Except, I don't know, Small Scottish Cat might have to throw down with Turgeon. I guess Small Scottish Cat can be my biggest painting fan, and Turgeon can be my biggest writing fan. How about that? Take all of your rain. Oh, no. Oh, fixing the roof. Oof. Oof, Agent Marvel. Agent, that is, yeah. Roof fixing is like, yuck. 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 Expensive and tedious. Alright, I'm going to actually remove all the sculpting tools from where they are in front of me because they are taking up way too much space. Too much space. So we're actually going to put things back where they belong. Crazy talk. Save it and read off. Alrighty. We're doing some gold today. We wanted to finish off this shield. Yeah, that's what we wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do anyway. There we go. And we'll get some of this stuff out of the way. Gotta grab my palette. Today I get to sand the base on my dragon bust to make it nice and flush, and then I can prime it. And then I can paint it Surf Aqua. Everybody looks at me funny when I say that, but Surf Aqua has potential. You can go a lot of places from Surf Aqua. Alrighty. Some of it, maybe not all of it. Well, at least some of it's money you don't have to pay. Alright, so we had gone with, actually with NMM Gold Shadow mixed with Arbich Leather to make sure that the tree on the shield stood out. Now we are going to we're going to remix that just to have it in case we need to touch up. Oh, won't be covered, huh? You know, insurance is getting like on one hand, like I've always kind of hated insurance. I've always kind of felt like it kind of seldom works for you and you pay so much money to it. But at the same time, it's like, I understand like they're getting hammered by the climate change stuff. But at the same time, it's like pulling entirely out of states seems like, I don't know. It's a less than ideal situation right now with insurance. Everything off the Atlantic. Very thoughtful of it. Yeah. I actually couldn't believe my insurance covered the catalytic converter theft, but that was my smartness. Past me was very smart with upgrading to comprehensive. I used to only carry the minimums, but then I was like, you know what? I think it was after the divorce, I just decided, you know what, I would be covered no matter what happens. and my car was old enough that it didn't cost that much. Definitely worth it when it saved me that $3,000. All right, so I'm gonna mix some russet brown with some black and brown. It's 3-to-1. That's gonna be my shadow for this. Then I'm gonna remix. Hey there, Turgeon. We were just saying that in a read-off you would beat Small Scottish Cat because Small Scottish Cat is my biggest painting fan and you're my biggest writing fan. I had to split my fandoms at this point. I don't want to offend the Small Scottish Cat because he might knock more of Kuroniko's miniatures on the floor in Retribution, and then I would be responsible. And like, I don't want that responsibility. I'm going to do 2 drops of the Rich Leather, 2 drops of the Anime. Oh, are you finally here? Are you finally here, Absentee Princess? Hello. Hello, Princess Kiki. She of the Squirrel watching priorities. Yeah. You had to make sure it wasn't going to come in, right? You had to make sure it wasn't going to come in. You're a good girl. You're a good girl. I don't know if she wants to come up or not. Do you want to come up? You don't like the knee. She's like, I'll come up on the chair. Thanks. Bubba. Bubba. Up, up. Bubba, up. Yeah, you can come up. Come on. Good girl. So, a small Kiki sighting for you this morning. Since we hadn't really started. Right, Bubba? Right, Bubba? Yeah. Oh, Bubba had a bad day yesterday, guys. I had a bad day, too. Silly Bubba here. I let her outside. And I was picking up some crap, and then I noticed she has something in her mouth inside. And she had found one of the sprues of 3D printer resin cured from printing out our stuff, and she was chewing it to bits. So ingesting 3D printer resin, even when cured, is not necessarily recommended. So little Miss Princess here got rushed to the vet, which actually, luckily, our regular vet had an opening up here. And then she had to barf it up. And then it turns out that after all that fuss and all that money, she actually was smart enough to just chew the resin and she didn't actually ingest any of it. Or if she did, it totally didn't come up. And it would have come up because everything else came up. So little Miss Princess here had a very bad day yesterday. Yeah, poor princess. Right, princess dog? Yeah, I know, you had a bad day. Okay, you off? Good girl! Yeah! No teeth. All right, work. Nope. Haven't you learned not to try to eat things you oughtn't? Nope. Work. It's work time, Papa. Yep. You do not get to come in here. Nope, I'm putting up a barricade. Yep, barricade. Oh, better safe than sorry. Yeah, I told David, because he was the one who left the sprues out at a level she could get them. Yeah, they absolutely do. They absolutely always find the last thing that you want them to. Papa, go settle or I'm exiling you. Papa, go settle. Work. But yeah, I told David because he had left them out where she could get them. I'm like, this is your $650 learning, experience. Because he's a new dog owner and he doesn't always do the automatic double check that I've got in my brain of can the dog get to anything of this stuff. So yeah, I'm like, this is your XP. You've earned $650 XP to level you up as a dog owner now. Oh, geez, Kuroniko. Well, they're shiny and they clink. So yeah, that could have been bad because that stuff is toxic. Probably not as bad once it's cured, but it still has the potential to cause a blockage and stuff. But luckily, being experienced dog owner, I'm like, I have to get this dog to the vet absolutely ASAP or they won't be able to induce vomiting. So we did. And it, she seems okay today, so. Oh, it's actually, it's not me, Neurotic. This is actually a sculpted shield. You should be praising Bobby Jackson, Lord of the Mini. Yeah, mine are actually taught from an early age, like, not to go after cords. Like, it's, like, something that I actively, like, redirect from so that they learn. Because I've actually never had a dog chew a power cord. I've worked really hard not to have one, so I'm careful about where we place them, and the ones that I do have out, I always, when they're young, I redirect all the time so that they learn that is not theirs. In general, I end up with dogs that are really good about sticking to in general, the stuff that they've been taught to chew. But when a new thing enters the environment that you haven't proofed against, you always have that question if they're going to do it. He's okay. Angry Link's okay. He's not my favorite right now. Who is my favorite right now? I think Jolie's my favorite right now. I always have a favorite child, no matter what we're working on. I think Jolie, I really like her face. I haven't done her eyes yet, but I feel like Jolie is my favorite child right now. Angry Link's pretty okay. Nobody else is. Well, Corinda is mostly done, but her base still needs a lot of work. Yeah, it's shocking. Right. Unfortunately, not funny shocking. Like, can kill your dog shocking. Alright, so. But yeah, so that happened yesterday, and I got absolutely 0 done because of it. And was absolutely exhausted because, emotional stress also. So, you love Angry Link? Well, good. I may have to check on the puppa. Speaking about... Although I think she's probably just collapsed in the bathroom. She is getting better. Don't be eating anything you want over there, puppa. I'm going to check on her. Just because I'm suspicious. Good girl. No, you can settle. Good girl. Yeah, you were doing exactly what I thought you were doing. No. That's okay, Bubba. You can go settle. Nope, false alarm. Mama's going back to work. False alarm. You would have to seriously make sure that your cat stayed away from it, Kerniko. Kiki, go settle. Like, you'd have to put it in the greenhouse. The thing is, actually, I should say this. Like, what I told David is I'm like... Okay, so they never have an opportunity. She never has an opportunity to get a finished model because we always have those like in no Kiki zones, right? Those are always in the hobby room on the desk. They're on the table. They're places that Kiki doesn't go. But like with the supports and stuff that we take off of them, that's what she got a hold of because David just was like, "Oh, this is trash," and he just left it there. He didn't think about it that Kiki would be over there. So it's like we take the support structure off. Put it in the curing. We've got a cure station now, so we just have to pop it in the box and hit the button so that it fully cures, and then when we come back out, we toss it in this trash bag. And that's it. And that would completely remove any chance that Kiki would get into anything. So that's like, if we didn't have that system in place. Yeah. Yeah. Like, you just gotta have a system in place, right? Yeah, your cats all love chewing spruce. And it's Kiki loved chewing the 3D resin because it's soft, right? It's easy to chew up. It's very gratifying, I imagine, to animals that like to chew. So we're going to do a little bit of Lantern Yellow. Hold on, I'm trying to get this inside. There we go. That's where we are. Lantern Yellow, I'm going to put a drop of the rich leather into it, which will give us kind of an ochre-like color. Yeah. All of our bags are put away. That's something that we're good. It's like I have protocols for all of these different items that can be troublesome with animals. But we did not have a protocol yet for the 3D printer stuff. And now we do. Thanks to the $650 price tag, now we do. But yeah, I could have done without that strain, and it totally, like, between the cleaners in the morning and that in the afternoon, because it hit right in the middle of lunch. I didn't even get to finish my lunch, of course. And so, yeah, it was just a really stressful, bad day yesterday that I didn't get anything done. And then in CrossFit, I managed to re-aggravate my, the calf that had sprained, I strained or whatever the heck I did to it before ReaperCon. So I keep re-aggravating that sucker, and that isn't helping it. So I'm going to have to start pretty much scaling everything at CrossFit. Oh yeah, crinkly noises. Even puppies like that. Some puppies like them more than others. Alright, so let's get these things mixed up. The white is 2-to-1. I'll probably add another drop to make it a little stronger, depending, but a 2-to-1 is still a pretty strong dot of white, and it's thin enough to go onto the model. And remember, just remember that thinning your paint is key when you're starting to level up. And if you want to go from like a silver to a gold at ReaperCon, we'll give a silver to a model that has shading and highlighting that isn't smooth, but it's there. You know, like if you're shading, highlighting, lining. But after that, it has to do with crispness and control. And if you're not going to blend, then doing, some texture, purposeful texture. So you don't have to do smoothness, but you have to do something. And all that stuff requires thinned paint. Thinner than you're probably comfortable with as you're coming up. And the key to that, remember, is, and you can go watch my Control Your Paint video on YouTube, or you can, if you're on my Patreon, I have a Control Your Paint Patreon post about thinning. But you've got to either, if you're using larger brushes, but you're bad about unloading them, like you don't have the patience to sit there and unload until you get the proper consistency, then you've got to switch to a smaller brush. Those are your two workarounds if you are starting to thin your paint to like the level that I do. Because if you try to use a bigger brush but you don't unload it, you're going to get puddles everywhere. It's not going to be controlled. So oh, nice. Yeah, cool show. Yeah, my mom likes quilt shows. My mom does sewing, and she did weaving for a while. She does all that kind of textile stuff. So whenever if I'm visiting and there's a quilt type show or a craft show, we always go. There we go. I never got into the fabrics until I started knitting. Though Andy Pieper, curse his name, is doing a very good job at getting me interested in picking up a 3D sculpting program. I really don't need another hobby at this point, Andy. Thankfully, there's a huge barrier to entry, which is having an iPad that will run Nomad. And that's an expensive iPad. So, and we already have an iPad that David got for doing, mostly for doing like stuff in Procreate with pre-coloring miniatures and working out color schemes and doing handouts for classes and stuff. But it definitely doesn't have enough RAM. So I'll have to put that on my, put $100 a month aside for a new iPad rule, which will save me from distraction for about a year and a half if I play my cards right. Because I still, especially having the 3D printer, like I'd like to be able to do like little things, and we might be able to do just like little things like candlesticks and stuff, little dungeon dressing things. Might be able to sculpt those just with his iPad. It's just when you get a bigger figure or a more complicated figure that it gets so big that if you don't have the RAM, you just can't do anything. Yeah, see, that's it, Carrie Michael, right? Yeah, got to get the 16. I priced it, and if I want a new pencil with it, it's going to be $1,658, I think. I always price these things out so I can start putting money aside toward them. I definitely, it works well. The envelope system works well for me. Whether I'm using a separate bank account as my envelope or an actual envelope. But it takes the money out of where I can see it and puts it aside. So I'm starting my envelope. Because, yeah, Nomad looks like it's actually enjoyable to use, unlike ZBrush. And it's so inexpensive. Oh, my God. Thank you, Nomad people, for making Nomad really inexpensive. Because ZBrush is not inexpensive. Yeah, because that was it, Agent Marvel. Honestly, you have really good brush control. And your contrast was good. And, you could have cleaned up some lining. That would have helped to crisp up everything. A lot of times when you're painting, you tend to, like when you're doing your highlighting or whatever, you tend to like go over. And I do the same thing. You watch me block out a line every once in a while. I go right back in and correct it right away. That's because I'll forget if I don't. Yeah, that's cool. Andy's like, I have Andy on text now because he loves my dogs, and so I've been asking him questions, and he's a great resource in general. I of course, did not take his nomad class because I generally leave those things to people like who really need the seat. I always figure I can get online on YouTube and do some watching and get up to speed and then ask if I have a specific question. I have a very self-taught bootstrap kind of mindset, and I think it's helped me in this hobby a lot. That's why I encourage people to cultivate that kind of mindset where, just try and learn, and just if you make mistakes, it's fine. It's great. You learn what not to do. All right, and the final thing we're going to mix, we got all of our gold colors, but the final thing we're going to mix is some brown liner, again, to touch up lines that I screw up, because inevitably. Yeah, hey, Corsair. Yeah, I figured, from what Andy said, I could download Nomad onto David's iPad, but we'd only be able to do very simple stuff. Which is kind of, the stuff that we would like to do in sculpting is just to make it, just to make little bits for basing and stuff. And I have to check online, but even with the basing, the STL basing sites that I was at, they just never have exactly the thing you want. So it'd be very helpful to be able to just do those little things, little bits. Like the brazier that I want for the base of Corindra. Being able to just sculpt something like that, a simple shape with a little bit of detail, would be really helpful. But we'll see. I don't have the iPad, so... Yes, it is a mobile. It is specifically mobile. Gimli? Yeah, see, David was working with Blender, and he was really irritated at it. And that's what made me actually remember that Andy had recommended Nomad at ReaperCon and was really all about it. Because the problem with Blender is that it's trying to do too much. It tries to be an animation thing. It tries to be a this. It tries to be a that. It tries to do all these things. And David was just getting very irritated at it, just wanting to do something else constantly asking him if he wanted to do something else when he was really trying to do one thing. And also it not having a very easy learning curve because of that, because there's just so many controls and they're just everywhere, and there's controls for this and controls for that, and there's no way to just do one thing on it. So it just didn't seem like it was ideal for what he was trying to do, which was to take a larger bust and to cut off some of the excess form at the bottom, because there wasn't much detail there, and he just was like, this would be a better bust if we just carved off these bits. Yeah, and so that's why I'm like gently pushing. And if he doesn't if he doesn't agree with me, then I'm just gonna go and save money and buy myself an iPad. It'll just take me a while. Like, my first task was to poke my husband with the really excellent job, who could just go out and buy the iPad. But he was like, I have an iPad. So I'm like, all right, you do you. I'll figure it out. I'll ask for gift cards for Christmas. Which is something, actually, that probably would work. I've done that in the past for my computer purchases. My parents tend to give us money for Christmas anyway. Yeah, $1 billion hotkeys for Blender. I don't need that. Yeah, and I hate recurring crap. I'd rather just buy a program and own it. Like, for all my writing stuff, when I was, like, looking at purchasing all these different programs, it's always like, I just pay the extra, do the one-time thing. I would much rather do that than be stuck paying money a month, because it just sucks all the life out of my bank account, if you know what I mean. Yeah, right, for occasionally using. Yeah, Gimli, exactly. Yeah, right. See, that's what I think, Carrie, but I gotta convince him. Convince him that we need a better iPad. Like, it took him a few hours of fighting with this thing and cussing at it while I was sitting there prepping my minis. And I'm like, sometimes... I mean, he now knows how to generally do that one thing, right? But yeah, right. Yeah, but like Valendar, let's be honest here. With the world today, that kind of that thing is going to end. It's not going to last. It's definitely not going to last. It's sad, but it's true. All right, so we now have all of the colors we ever need. Okay, not true, but we have all the colors we need to screw around with our NMM. Like, that's where you're just like, you know what? I'm happy I got into this thing early so that everything right now is free. Yay me. And then you're like, I know it's going to end, but for now, I'm happy. Like, I'm very pragmatic about that in the world today. That's why I will absolutely just buy flat out pay for, and hopefully hope that the updates stay free for as long as they can. And sometimes if the updates aren't free anymore, I just stop updating and try to find another tool. Depends on how much of a part of my livelihood it will be, right? All right, so I'm going to do a shadow. Just when you're doing NMM on these little squirrely thingly jigs where they're tiny and you can't really realistically highlight and shade them, doing the general shadow is a good idea. So I'm going to put a shadow there just to break things up. Otherwise, you can do the shadow in line with the shadow here on the shield. So we do want to pay attention to this bigger highlight and the fact that the shadow starts here if we're looking at the shield. So I want to bring that shadow in. But the difference is that unlike the shield, since this is going to be gold, we want a general highlight as well down here on the bottom. Good, Corsair, excellent. Yeah. Right, Mac Attack. See, that's just it. Like, monthly crap adds up, and people understand this. I definitely understand it. Like, I very much depend on knowing how much money is in my account, and coming in and out of my account. What was the book? There's like a book that convinced me that like the peace of mind is directly tied to knowing exactly what's coming in and out of my bank account. I think I mentioned it before. It is, I think it's Your Money or Your Life. Pretty sure it's Your Money or Your Life. Yep, Your Money or Your Life. Yep. By Vicki Robin. If I have it on audio, I probably need to listen to it again. Some of the stuff, it's not really out of date. Like but some of the specific financial advice at the end is just things change, right? But that book. Oh, thanks for the resub! Yay! And then you resub. Well, that's because we're cool, but we appreciate it. Also, I mean, as far as it goes, Twitch sub at least you can choose. You can choose to resubscribe based on your value, right? Right, but David isn't into Nomad right now. Like, no, he's in Blender. Like, I need to convince David to go to Blender, or just go to Blender myself and take advantage of the Andy connection myself. Like, that's what I tend to do. Like I said, I was just like, can I convince my my very flush with cash hubby to buy me a new iPad? No, I can't. All right, I'll just go and do it myself then. That's what I love about being a self-sufficient Anne. Kick vanity to the curb. But yeah, if you've ever struggled with your finances and like just generally giving Your Money or Your Life a read is a real eye-opener. Like, her system seems like it's really, really a lot of work, but actually I found that depending on your household finances, but it really gave me a lot of peace of mind when I was trying to balance things after the divorce, when I had a lot of expenses and my income was less than I wished it was for what I had to do. So now I'm much more cognizant of like when I hit the spend money button. It just made me a lot more mindful. All right. I'm going to get closer. I'm going to make sure I'm in focus. I am. So what I'm doing here is I'm just bringing in a general highlight here on these little guys. I'm using a mixture of my highlight color and pure white. This is more for glazing because you can get really washed out looking when you go from here to here. So when I need to bring back that rich yellow tone, that's what I'm putting this in for. So that's more of just a kind of a bridging color than one I actually highlight with. Yep. Yeah, envelope system works, man. Yeah, $80 for 18 months seems like it's good. Painting questions. Suggest as far as amount of color, value difference between colors. So essentially what I used to tell people, Agent Marvel, is 5. Remember the Pentad stuff that I put out for my Patreon? There is a real 5-color progression in most of what I do. So here's your deal, Agent Marvel. If you're going to keep your 4 to 3, and like remember that how high you went up on that purple on the Necromancer that you painted? If you're going to keep those few amount of colors, you must thin a lot more. If you want to keep your thicker paint, but you still want good transitions, then you must start mixing more intermediate shades. So intermediary shades. So you've got those 2 choices that you can do. If you had taken those purples that you did on that Necromancer, which I think was a 3 color or something like it, and you had mixed in a color between each of those colors, your transition would have looked a lot smoother. And then if you would have thinned just a little more, you would have gotten a really smooth blend. So you can use both of those and get really good results. But progression, especially if you're going from a really dark shadow up to obviously your purple would have been around here, in which case, and your darkest shadow was around there. So here's my progression for 5 here. But you can see, and I've talked about using the grayscale for this before. I don't know if you were on at that time. But when you mix this, if you've got a color wheel, this is where your grayscale comes in handy, right? So figuring out that this is a value 9, that your highlight color is a value 9, and then going down and seeing that, yeah, so this goes from a 9 to a 6. I would probably do a space in between here. I would do a color in between here. So usually it's 1.5 to 2 steps, and you don't need to, and then you can just thin. But if I've got too high of a problem, especially when you get to your highlights, because the minute you add white to any color, and any light color that you are using other than a pure yellow is going to have white. When minute you add white, you have to thin it a lot more or mix another transition. So I've got to, essentially, if I'm layering and I want a smooth blend, I've got to put something in here. I'm not doing it here because this is so tiny. But if I was doing the cape in this color instead, I would absolutely be mixing an intermediate shade between these two, because going from a 9 to a 6 is too much. 3 steps is too much. Unless you're going to thin so much that you're building up just crazy translucent layers. That's going to take you forever, so I wouldn't recommend it. It's how I do white, but you have to. Like, it's not even most likely, you must. Or you must mix a color between. It's choices. But if you want your blending to look good, those are your 2 tools. You're either making the colors closer together so that you can't see brush strokes as much that way, or you are thinning more to make your paint transparent so that you can build up those layers. You can use those 2 things together to get really nice blends. But usually people gravitate more toward one or the other. And then you've got glazing to bring it all together. Yeah, it's not really a choice there. You've got to use one of these tools because blending depends on similarity, right? You're either thinning the paint to make a slow transition from X color to Y color, or you are mixing A, B, C color in between X and Y to make that smooth transition, or you're using both. But the more you thin, the less you need to worry about that, but there is a limit. There's a limit. That two-stage grayscales, especially with the highlights. So, yeah. Well, I told you, Agent Marvel, we will get you to gold. We will get you there. We're just going to very specifically troubleshoot. And since blending was what the majority of people mentioned on your model, I would pick that to work on and really hit it hard. Like when you paint, maybe even just get some test models where, you know, if you've got extra bones or something from a Kickstarter, like models that you don't really care that much about, but, you know, whatever, try to blend. If you're painting stuff for D&D, like spend 15 minutes on one of those models when you first sit down trying to work on your blending. And just fit it in little chunks. You don't have to sit there for hours and do it, and you shouldn't. You should do it when you're fresh so your brain can learn easier. So when you sit down to paint that goblin and he's got a little loincloth, okay, I'm going to try to blend this better. Right? Spend 15, 20 minutes and then move on with your gaming painting. It's just a tool, and you don't have to. You can just look at the colors and say, wow, there's a big difference between these. When your gut tells you there's a big difference between these, that's when you mix an extra color. And here, these guys are a lot closer, right? You can kind of feel it, even if you like, you see they're different, and you should, but you can tell that this to this is not as much of a difference as that. And I would say that's a two-step difference. So the grayscale is just my way to teach this to you, to give you an objective measure. So yeah, so value 4 to value 6. So, or 7. Was it 7? If it's 7, no, it's 6. Yeah, it's 6. So 4 to 6, this is about as much as you'd want. So I could use this to highlight that. I might need to do some spot wet blends or some glazes, but I could do it. 1.5 to 2 is about good. But it depends, because as you get darker, you tend to get a little more transparent. So that's why you don't have to necessarily watch it as much down here. But the minute you start adding that white in, the minute it starts shifting lighter, that's when you start to really have to worry. Because you're going to find it much easier to blend darks and mids, and not as easy to blend lights. Hey, Doc Faust, how's it going? You don't always have to be like super thin, but you have to choose, right? You can I mean, when people using, okay, so wet palette painters, guys, which is not me, but you'll see them mixing a bunch of transitions, right? And that's how they get around the fact that they're not using like super thin paint, because their paint consistency is variable. They can add water to their paint, but the water will leach down right into the sponge. Usually fairly quickly, but you know, they can get in general. But because they're usually not working with as thin paint as I can on the well, they're mixing a whole bunch of transitions, right? That's what the wet palette is really good at, especially if you're doing textures. So the wet palette excels at that and at spot blends, and so that's how they're dealing with the transition problem. They can just infinitely mix what they need. Yeah, that's why I say just like at the start of your painting session, if you've got like an hour and you're working on D&D models for the game or whatever, just take like 15 minutes of that and grab a model that has some space to blend and just work on it. Just work on looking at it and then stop and, you know, do with the painting you need to do for your game or whatever you're doing, whatever project you're doing. So there's definitely diminishing returns if you like make yourself sit for hours. So, and you probably don't have the time to do that anyway, because as I recall, you have a toddler. So, but yeah, just start thinking about it. Because if we can get your blending in line, your brush control is good enough, then we need to just work on crispness. And then we can get you to gold. So just doing a little highlight at the top of each of these little flourishes, because the light would be hitting down there. While you use the cold palette. Yeah. So that it doesn't wick through, Dr. Faust. And if you have not checked out Dr. Faust's resources, streaming and YouTubing and all sorts of stuff these days, right? I haven't checked out what's your focus these days, Doc Faust. Like, what are you? Where can people find you the most? Like, where if they were going to start with your content, where should they seek you out first? Because I know you've got a crap ton of content because you've been doing this for years, like me. Twitch and YouTube. All right. So do check out Doc Faust. He does a lot of things differently than I do, and that's always valuable. Because what I do may not resonate with you on some levels, but then you might look at, like, well, that's why it's not just like Doc, but like James Wapple also does stuff very differently than I do. And we're looking at a bunch of painters who paint with different styles and different tools, and that all gives you guys more tools to work with to see what resonates with you and what works for you, right? Everything is going to work for people differently. We're all individuals. So the more you can explore different methodology and then try it and feel how it feels to you and see if it works for you, like, the faster you're going to make strides with your mini painting. And it takes time to try different things and to give them a chance. And just because you might try something once and it doesn't really work for you doesn't mean it'll never work for you. So kind of put it on the back burner for a while and then come back around to it. Yeah, there's our shout out. Thank you. Thank you, Quindy. Hey, Zachariah. Good to see you. Meetings. Pain in the butt meetings. So I'm coming down here and I'm going to pick up a little bit of these details. And really, when you're playing with these little tiny twirly things, honestly, it's all stylistic. Uber sick, no! The mobile app is a nightmare, yes. Sorry, Quindy. Quindy's stuck on mobile today. Twitch's mobile app is a nightmare. I absolutely 100% agree. So we're going to actually block in the middle of this because we know that this is all rounded and light. So we want to bring up a gold highlight, a general gold highlight toward the middle, right about here, before we go on highlighting all these little fiddly bits. So I'm just going to bring up, and you guys are going to see what I was talking about when I take this light color. Brushstrokes instantly show up. Ah! Yes. Dogfather, I need to look at your work. You're on my Patreon, aren't you? Like, when we run into this sort of thing, guys, use your resource. If you're on my Patreon, you can post in work in progress and tag me, just like we're doing with Agent Marble here, and I will figure out why. Because I've been judging this thing since it, like, was created. And even though I'm not, like, some other judging teams may judge differently than my team, I still know all these people, and I've judged with most of them in the past. And I know the general criteria that we're doing. So in order to help these two blend, I'm going to be kind of doing a little bit of wet blending around the edges. Because, like I said, the 3 steps between my mid and my highlight is a bit much. Yeah, I mean, post in the Discord. If you post your stuff. Did you talk to judges afterwards at all, Dogfather, or no? Because the most valuable, like, thing you can do is to say, how could this have gotten silver? And it could be something as simple as your model choices may be more challenging now and require you to do more than you did in the old days. But, I mean, I'll help. Just, like, reach out. Because most of the time, the path from bronze to silver can be broken down pretty simply. Like, there's always, like, one, maybe two key things you could do. Oh, you did last year. Okay. And what was the one thing they wanted you to do? Like, did you ask, like, if I did one thing? Or if you didn't ask, then just ask me. Just, if you can get decent pictures of your stuff, like, just ask me. I'll help. I want to see you guys succeed. And I know a lot of you feel like you're kind of stuck in the bronze to silver gravity well. So, I mean, I'm here for a reason. And I'm a technique whore, so, if you're weak on a technique, I can help you. It's kind of what I do. But yeah, just post, if you want to post in my Discord, Dogfather, that's fine. And I'll kind of break down what I think it was. The shelves are sometimes different year to year, but in general, the leap from bronze to silver comes with a certain level of cleanness and highlighting and shading. And what I sometimes find people do, especially if they score like silver, they might start choosing models that are very much more challenging in a way, or that need to be painted to a higher standard. And although difficulty of the project does weigh in your favor when we're scoring, if you choose a difficult project, but then your techniques don't level up along with it, then I could see it actually hurting you. Oh, right. I remember. Yeah. I remember that, your experience. But yeah. Post your new stuff, Dogfather. You know I'm not going to be a jerk. All right, so I've got some light here at the center of the shield to kind of go with the highlight in general. I'm going to spread that highlight out. I do some spot blends. So one of the ways, Agent Marvel, that I deal with having this is that if I'm highlighting, I'll do a spot mix. And I'll just use that spot mix if I need a tone halfway between. If I'm seeing that I've got a lot of streakiness or it's not blending well, I'll just mix it, and since I've got a lot of water in it, it's going to stay on my brush for a little while here until I can spread that highlight out from the center into the branches of the tree. And that's where, when we get out to these little tiny fiddly bits, that's where we kind of stop and go, all right, now we need a slightly different highlighting tactic. But I can at least use this brush full of paint. I'm still going on that same brush full of paint, by the way. That tiny little puddle that I mixed. So you can see how thinning your paint. Now, it is more humid here where I am. So if you're in a drier climate, you're going to need to go back and, remix it. If you're going to be mixing a lot of it, like if you're using a big surface, then just make another well full. That's halfway between this. But since I am working on a very small surface and I don't need that much highlight, I can do it. Yep, it's pretty shield day. That's what it is. Yeah, well, I mean, give us some cred there, Dogfather. Michael did talk to all the judges after that year and stressed to them that inappropriate conduct is just generally will get you uninvited from the team. So, I mean, do give people some cred here. So, in general, although we are all extremely tired and exhausted after spending 3 to 4 hours judging miniatures, and sometimes people lose their filters. In general, we all really do want to help you be a better painter. And also remember the judging teams do change. But those things together, like, I've seen people get wibbly wobbly at the end of judging just because they're so tired. After doing a full con where we all have to put our public face on and talk to people and give feedback and teach, then we have to go and spend, 3 to 4 hours putting our, hard critic hat on and judging. Not an excuse for what happened, but Michael did remind everybody of the point of why we're here, so. David does. Here I've already chosen my light angle, so I really can't go away from it. I've chosen the overhead light, pretty much straight up down. It gets you really exhausted by the end. You're totally burned out by the end of judging MSP. Like, I'm amazed that people come back and do it every year, except that we all like to give back, so. And we know that we're needed, so. But yeah, since I already chose, like, where my light is coming from, and I've already done my shadow here, it's the most straightforward, like doing just the top down light gently from the zenith, and it's the one that I think you should start with. If you don't have your highlights like figured out when you're just doing your general top down soft zenith light, you're gonna have trouble when you try to apply a directed lighting effect from an angle. So. Yeah, well, and the same team may not be working on, your stuff, too. It's also helpful to know whether you got a high bronze or a low silver or things like that. Because, honestly, sometimes when we're looking at a model, we've got a benchmark. We've usually got a few benchmark models from the early stages of judging. And we're like, okay, we rated this model a low silver, so you have to hit at least this level to get a silver. And those models will obviously they change every year. So there is a tiny bit of wiggle. In general, I feel like we're pretty consistent at this point. I can walk in and just pretty much rate a model when I look at it. But yeah, Corsair, it's like, from this one, it's like I'm gonna shift it a little bit because top down is actually at a bit of an angle, but in general, when you are looking at the model, assuming you do know how to do directed lighting, then sometimes I will choose like an off angle if I think it's gonna look better. However, with my orc, you guys remember Orky, right? Mr. Comic Book Orc. I definitely chose a specific angle. Where is he? Oh, he's over there. 1 second. Yeah, let's get teaching aid. Oh, my legs needed to stretch anyway. So there are some models that you just look at and you know instantly what your angle has to be of light, and Orky is one of them because it's pretty obvious looking at him that the way the light has to come is face on. Like, he's a side pose, so you're not going to you could do it just a top down, but it's much more dramatic to have the light be focused on the face and have everything else be moving away, right? So yeah, straight twos? All right. Well, let me look at it, Dogfather. Yeah, let me look at them. But yeah, so in this case, Corsair, in this case, it's obvious, what angle is best for this model. So, yes, sometimes, but honestly, with anything Reaper here, with anything 28, I really feel like unless I am doing a directed lighting effect specifically because of the model in OSL, unless I'm doing this, we're doing top-down Zenith OSL for 28 mil. Because I really feel like it's the best choice. I feel like unless you're looking for a specific kind of lighting effect, or you're trying to practice something like directed lighting like Mousy here, or you have if you've got an OSL source in the piece, I feel like top-down is the way to go. Oh no, bailing! Bye, Pendrake! So, I just, and that's just my conviction after years of working on 28mm versus other stuff. I'm much more likely to choose a directed light source on a bust because I've got more room to execute on it, and sometimes the bust will, like, be obviously shouting for, you know, paint me face forward. And you also have to look at what you're gonna kind of lose, right? Like, when we're painting from the light source from this direction, you can see the zenith. You're going to lose a lot of this, right? You're going to lose a lot of that. So you have to see if your choice of lighting still allows you to pick out the cool details of the model. Like, that should be part of your judging process. The problem with doing something like that on 28 and why it can be less successful is you just don't have as much room to execute. And because the model itself doesn't cast realistic shadows and highlights, it can be harder to make that work on a small miniature. Notice that the models that I tend to do directed lighting on that don't have obvious OSL light sources tend to be larger, right? He's huge compared to the elf. So Rock Troll being the main example of doing an extremely directed lighting. And then, you know, we've also done Snack, and Snack has an obvious OSL light source, so we're definitely doing it. We're definitely taking advantage of that in this model. And you can see the light coming down. But because this model's a little bit bigger, but it still was very hard to carry off. Technically, but something like my, you remember my Overwatch statue, my Soldier 76? That's a 1 to 6 scale. So every like 12 inches, like one. I lost it. Essentially, a 1 foot model to represent a 6 foot tall human. So I would say that at statue size, you can get away with just block painting and have it look good. But that said, Butts, if you've ever looked at like Kathy Wapple's big stuff or Rusty Nails stuff or anybody else who does the really big scale stuff in the show, you're going to see that putting in at least a basic level of shading and highlighting does a lot for you. And textures do a ton for you. So just because you don't need to shade as much doesn't mean you stop shading, and you also have the opportunity to do a lot of textures and highlighting. So does that make sense? Because like that's what Soldier has, right? It's like the shadows on him are actually pretty subtle. One sec. So the shadows on Soldier are actually pretty subtle. I'm far more focused on textures than on shadows. I still have some shadows. See them? You can still see that there are shadows. And you can see that there are shadows. But I am keeping the shadows more subtle, except when I have to do the metals. I'm keeping the shadows much more subtle, and what comes up then are the highlights. The highlights and the textures are what is being popped here to make everything stand out. So here on the red, shadow, pretty subtle. Pretty subtle shadows. Highlights, definitely popping. See that? So anyway, so when you go really big to that 1 to 6 scale or bigger, that's when your shadows become much less the point. You put just enough shadow to accentuate what's already there. Because remember, the thing about it, Butts, is that if somebody picks up your model and moves it around under the light source, they're instantly going to see the lack of shadows. If they lean it back so that the light is coming full on it, it's instantly going to be evident that you didn't put any shading on it, and it's going to show up weirdly. Yeah. But you also could do, if you prime white, you can also do a thing where you put a bright desk lamp over your model after you prime it white, and put a sheet of colored paper underneath the model in a color that will reflect. That will show you both reflected light, shadow, and your highlights. I recommend doing the colored light on the bottom just so that it's very clear to see at that point. Same if you want to do a fire effect, like if you're doing a model and there's like something is burning and reflecting firelight back up at the underside of the model, like if they're walking away from an explosion or something. Doing an bright orange piece of paper, shining the light down and noticing where the orange reflects onto the model is a nice trick. But I mean, everything that we're doing is an illusion, and anything that you use to try to help you in that kind of way is going to be imperfect. And really what it comes down to is do it to the best of your ability and trust your gut. Your gut knows how an object should look under light if you let it tell you, and don't double think yourself too much, which is, overthinking is probably the biggest problem a lot of painters have. And have finding it hard to step back and really assess your own work along with that. So that's where having a Discord, a painting Discord or community or friend that you can show your work to can really help. Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, the better way, Korniko. Like, it's like, what I usually recommend for people, honestly, is doing the Zenith Prime with your light source in mind, and then taking photo of it, front and back, sides, everything. And then remembering that, if you even see a tiny speck of white primer on that area, you should highlight it. You may not highlight it as much, but you should highlight it. Like, I find that Zenith priming worked better for me, as far as, like, I still do it when I'm doing an unusual light source, like the orc. Like, since I don't normally do that angle of light sourcing, I definitely wanted to do the Zenith Prime to help me out. But that said, there are parts of the model that I do want to stand out that are not in that direct light, so I'll end up doing a secondary light source probably to just bring out a little bit of the underlying areas that are otherwise in shadow. But there's always reflected light in the environment. So I'm moving out into those little areas. Yeah, if you've got a good person who can give you feedback, that's really valuable, Korniko. Yeah, and then you just have to take into account, you know, they don't like NMM, all right. Because when you know that, then you can account for it. So on these little curlicues, let's just get in focus closer, or I'll get zoomed in more. There we go, zoom me in more. I'm just pretty much doing the top and bottom of each of these. I'm leaving some shadow in between. Yeah, learning lighting isn't easy, and it's especially the European style of lighting, which is very bold and very poppy. A lot of painters over there doing that. I tend to like the Keurig work a bit better because I like a more natural result. But that said, what stuff like Luca and Sergio and Robert Carlson do, which is very, very full of pop and very strong light sourcing, and really like a lot of color, saturated color. That can be really, really bold and stand out and look fantastic. So there's a place for all of it. You don't have to do it. Like, your style should be your style. Like, if you really want to paint that way, then you can make the effort to paint that way. There's a lot of... I mean, Luca's an excellent resource. And his streams are excellent resources to watch how he does things. It's a different mentality. And if I worked on more big models on this stream, you'd see a different mentality too. Nurgle Mini, yeah. Well, to be fair, yeah. That's the thing with the new Nurgle models. Is that they are hideous, but it's possible to paint them to a really high level because the detail is there. I wish I liked Nurgle because I would have picked some up, but I've just never been drawn to that particular Chaos God. Yeah, for sure. And you could always tell people when you want them to have a harder, like, you know, put their more criticizing caps on. Like, if you want people to really, really be hard on your stuff, tell them so. Otherwise, they're generally going to give feedback at a more helpful level. They're not going to be really hard on you. So it depends on how you work, right? I don't like people to be really hard on me. I want them to look at my work and say, you know, this could be a little better, or this isn't reading right to me, or this looks a little off. David and I constantly do the thing where we, like, critique the part that we're not supposed to be critiquing yet. So we have to remind each other, no, we're not critiquing that part yet. I just opened now with what do you want me to look at when I'm looking at one of his models? Which part am I looking at? GB Nurglets. The new Nurgle you do need to be tidy with because the sculpts are sharp. But yeah, that old Nurgle stuff. Not my jam, but if you like it, Richard, more you go you. Some of those old Chaos models are pretty awesome. I used to have a bunch of the old Chaos Warriors that had all the different, like, heads. Like the dog-like one and there were a bunch of different, really individual sculpts. And I like the old Chaos Steeds, although the new Chaos Steeds are pretty darn awesome too. GW does some good models. They're just freaking expensive, so I'm very selective if I'm going to buy one. That's why my last two GW purchases have been battle forces that are limited and priced very well. Lets me get a bunch of stuff that's kind of cool without having to blow the bank on it. But yes, exactly. But there's a point where that will not work for you. We all have that thing, and I am very hard on myself, so I get it. I won't show something to David unless I'm like, all right, I'm feeling like this is good. Tell me why it's not. Tell me what it needs. And hey there, Luca, we were just talking about you. Not in any, like highly suspect manner, just referring to your paint style and how good of a teacher you were. Yeah, that whole like I'm hard enough on myself. That's a mental game you're playing with yourself, and it's a fear thing. I had to acknowledge that it was my fear of having other people give me criticism. So if I'm hard on myself, then nothing anybody else says to me can hurt me, right? See, it's that. So that's the thing. So beware of that, because there will come a point when it will no longer serve you. And maybe you aren't out there to be like a top level painter, in which case you don't ever have to ask for anybody else's feedback if you don't want. I mean, but if you want to get better, there will come a point where your eye will not work for you as much unless you are constantly looking at other people's high level work and developing your eye and then developing your technique. Then you come to a point. But I mean, even David, you guys know, my David is a very, very, very good painter. He still seeks feedback from other high-level painters. Like, he'll still send something to Sergio and ask a question. He'll still share with Bryce. He'll still, he still seeks... It comes from changing your mindset to the point it's not criticism anymore. It's helping get better. Somebody else's eye can help me faster than I can help myself. Because I speak as someone who for a long time avoided seeking out criticism from other painters because I was afraid that actually my stuff was bad and I would get, I would feel bad essentially after criticism. But I realized that I was just trying to be an escapist and that I needed to face up. And honestly, when I started asking for feedback, it wasn't nearly as bad as my brain had painted it. We talked about this a while ago. There's a study out there, a couple of studies out there, but one of them specifically looked at how we receive feedback and the feedback types. You guys will remember this, I'm sure. The feedback types were, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then, I guess it's like that kind of thing. And then there's the you did that, and then there's the total like ignores what you're talking about, right? Those are all the feedbacks. And the only feedback that makes our brain like open up and relax and puts it in a good situation to learn more or progress is the enthusiastic, no holds barred feedback. Even the questionable criticism feedback has the potential to shut our brain down because it's like an attack, right? So you have to get in that mindset where it's not an attack anymore, it's helping you get better, and that's how you short circuit that mental process. How do you stop looking at him and you only see mistakes? You always see mistakes, Curtico. You painted that sucker. You know where you glossed it over. You know where you half-assed it. You know where that thing isn't working out. However, what you may find surprising is that many people will not focus in on those mistakes of yours. They will not. Same thing with writing. Like, there are places in my book that it would be like, well, maybe I kind of wish maybe I would fix that or change that, but people never notice it. Like, so you are obsessing about your mistakes far more than anybody else out there will. And it's because, again, it's that fear factor. It's that if I can just fix all my mistakes, no one will be able to criticize me and I won't feel attacked. So you just gotta, like, at some point, just go to the land of don't care. Or go to the land of, if they notice this mistake, it's okay, I already know about it. Or fix it. They find all new mistakes, exactly. Yeah, Bryce gives really great feedback. Yes. David regularly turns to Bryce. Oh, hold on. I saw a question and then okay. At your level, like, what color should this be? Ah, okay. Yeah, right. Exactly, Richard. But yeah, I mean, I always look at my stuff and see the stuff that isn't as good. And I mean, that's where, like with the orc, which is, potentially at some point a competition entry, if I see something I don't like that's bothering me, like right now, the cheekbone is bothering me, I'll change it. I'll paint over it and do it again before I finish the model, before I show it to anybody. If there's something that I can see is not good, like, then I'll change it. If you're not sure, if you're like, show it to somebody and see if they see it. But like, I love the cross-hatching effect that I've got going on here, right? I was playing with that, and some of it's down here too. And I'll definitely do more of that. I really like that effect. So like, a lot of that model is me working out how I'm going to execute on comic book to a level and in a way that feels good to me. So I do like the controlled cross-hatching, so I'll probably do more of that on Orky. But yeah, I mean, a lot of our own progression is just getting out of our own way. Just opening ourselves up to feedback, understanding that it's not an attack, it's going to make us better. Or if you don't want to think in terms of better or worse, think in terms of options. Everybody loves freedom and options, right? Everybody loves options. So feedback from someone else gives you more options because they may point out something or suggest a technique that you hadn't thought of. And then you have a direction to go that, could end up, really being fun. So thinking of it that way, reframing it in your mind is very important. And it's all to do with your goals. Some people, like I said, if you don't want to get like to competition level, then all that's important is that you're enjoying your work and that you enjoy the result. And the only feedback you should ask for in that case is if you're really a little dissatisfied with a technique that you have or an execution and you really can't see how to make it better, or you're not sure what technique you could use to make something better, then ask for that feedback. But I mean, you don't have to, turn to competitions. Like, painting competitions aren't for everybody. It can be fun to have one like ReaperCon or World Expo where you just go and show your stuff off and you don't really care. You're competing against yourself at that point. Those competitions can be more fun, I think, because you're just like, hey, look what I did this year. Oh yeah, for speed paint stuff, Corsair, wet blending is the hack. Like, having wet blending in your toolbox is a total cheat for speed paint. You can execute so much faster on certain techniques in the limited time you have. Yeah. Before I learned wet blending, I hated speed paint competitions. Yeah, we've got some scale creep going on, but you know what? Since I'm old and I have to use reading glasses to paint now, I don't care. I like bigger models and I cannot lie. Yeah, I feel like our stuff is consistently 32 to 34. Which I like because I feel like you can do more detail at that point as a sculptor and as a painter. And it makes it easier to paint things like eyes and small details. So yeah. Some people don't like scale creep. I don't care. I find that most 28s in the world nowadays are actually 32 to 34s. So some are 36 to 40s. Although if it's a 40 millimeter, they do tend to flag it as a 40 millimeter. But yeah. Yeah, so like this is with the Bones USA especially, which is with this guy. Like if I take out my handy millimeters and I go from top of the head, we've got about a 30, let's see here, 33, 32, 33. You guys can see. And he's crouching a little bit. But yeah, but I like this scale. This scale really, compared to the really tiny, like, True 28s. And gosh, you go back to the True 25 era and you're like, whoa, what happened here? Okay, bye, Corsair. Hope I was helpful today. Okay, so our shield is starting to look really pretty. I like it a lot. I want to do, we've got a Luca on deck, so I probably should wrap it right here, and next time we'll work on the upper banner here, and we'll work on highlighting this reflected light down here. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how it's coming together. You guys can see, though, how doing NMM on something this fiddly takes time. And it took our stream, pretty much, to get to the point where I'm pretty happy with this area. So, but it looks good, and it reads well, and I am still seeing the shape of the tree. That's the advantage of, like, having this general shadow and the general highlight, is you can still see the trunk of the tree enough that even when this gets lighter and keeping this highlight at the center here, you still have some dark out here on the branches. So it's coming together. Yeah, Dark Sword also. Oh yeah, like the old stuff. The old stuff is just, it's a more 25, 28. And at that point, when everything went to 28, the 25 millimeter people were like unhappy. They felt that, yeah, they didn't like the scale creep. So yeah, it's NMM. Yes, and cheeks. I do a mostly NMM on this stream. We do have a metallic model going on right now. And that is Karindra here. She's done her that's metallics, the armor's, it's shaded metallics, so I am controlling the highlight level, but you can see the light shift on it. But yeah, I paint my metals a lot like I paint my my NMM. Because I still like to control where the highlights and shadows are and make everything look crisp. And for 28, that's just what I like. For bigger stuff, I do tend to like shaded metallics more. Depending on what I'm doing. Like my big orc bust that I'm working on, he's gonna be the bits of metal on him. He's gonna be NMM because since he's comic book, he wouldn't have metallic ink in a comic book. So yeah. Yeah, I am a more advanced painter and cheeks, but I regularly spend most of the stream answering more beginner and intermediate questions. I like to. Hi there, Kiki. My puppy is here. She's like, it's walk time. So yeah, we do all levels of kind of technique and stuff on this, but way too hard. Yeah, it is and it isn't. When you get used to NMM and you do a lot of it, it isn't any harder than metallics. In some ways, metallics are harder at that point because they don't blend as well. So Kiki has questions about NMM. Do you? But you have brown fur. I don't think I can do a brown NMM. You look rusty. Bubba. You want to come up and say hi? Yay! There's a Kiki. All right, Kiki to end the stream. One Kiki to rule them all. Hi, good girl. I've got you. Good girl. Kiki's like, it's time, Mama. It's time to walk. Yay! Can she eat it? Yes, exactly, right. There you go, Miniatures Den. I know you like to see my papa. Yeah, Kiki is large and in charge. Okay, you big dingo. All right, everybody. She's majestic and a dork, Miniatures Den. She's such a dork. She's just a puppy. She's trying to eat my Fitbit right now. She's just a puppy. Oh, such a puppy. Oh, such a puppy. All right, Bubba. Oh, get down. Okay, I'm going to end the stream so that Miniatures Den can take over. Now that I've been... puppy attack, snooze at 10.